Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to our Lessons Learned with our friend Cynthia Deverson. She's a PMP guru now. She got certified when, Cynthia? When was it? How many days ago?
Last Monday, whatever that date was. Oh my goodness, what day was it?
Wow. Well, we've been on this journey together. You've also been very instrumental in being one of the pioneers of our daily scrum. So I want to thank you personally for setting up the group that everyone is buzzing about, because we now have a lot of support on that group. And I want to thank you for setting that up. But it's come full circle when the person who set up the group and everyone started getting certified as a result of it and finding a lot of engagement. And now you're a PMP. So I'm really grateful to you. And I'm really excited that you are now a PMP. So Cynthia, let's start off with this question about your PMP journey. Why did you want to get certified in the first place?
So many reasons. I think the first reason was the idea of imposter syndrome. I started off in a job where the job description was so vague, it didn't really inform me as to what my actual role was. So maybe a year and a half into the job, I realized I'm actually managing a project. And I had no management skills, never delegated, never led a team, never made high-level decisions, never put something on his feet from the ground up. And so I was doing a lot of self-teaching, internet searching, going to people who had a similar program and seeing how they did things. And so I didn't feel prepared for the job that I was in, which to this day still technically doesn't say project manager, but I've had to add that level so that people understand what I do. So I needed something to prepare me. I'm obviously not going to go back and get an MBA or anything like that, but I said, well, what is a certification where I can gain some skills to help me improve myself and then to show to others that I actually am qualified for this position. So I don't know what happened. For a while, my job did put me briefly as a project manager title, and because of that, in my where I work is very renowned from different places. A university did a search, saw my title, and started offering project managing training for this certification. So that's how I first learned about certification, through a university saying, "We'll train you for this." Very expensive, by the way, 4 digits. But yeah, that's how I first heard the title, the certification PMP. And then when I went home and Googled it, I eventually came to your name. It was several other video teachings, as you know, several that are very well known, but I saw yours because you had so many videos. And then I said, okay, then I watched one and I said, oh, I think I can do this. So watching you is actually what caused me to sign up for that course at the university. And that was in 2020 when I finally signed up for that course. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is I eventually would like to move forward to a higher level job. And I want to make sure I get the skills now for a higher level position. Because I feel like a lot of my best skills are not being utilized.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So that really speaks to how you found out about me, why you did the PMP. And let's talk about when you did that first course. What year was that?
It was exactly October 2020. When all of us were working from home. So it's perfect timing. All of us were, and that's actually why I did it, because actually I learned about the course in 2019 and was so overwhelmed. I would have had to drive from work to that campus and then end up coming back home at 9 o'clock 3 days a week, which was overwhelming. So I finally did it in 2020 when we were all working from home. So I signed up for it. It was a 35-hour class. I think it was 3 hours per night for 3 nights a week for 6 weeks. And it was actually very similar to your class, to be honest. But I took it from October. Well, it's more than 6 weeks. I'm sorry. It's almost like a semester. It was from October to right before Christmas. And it was actually a good course, but I found it to be very verbose and not very interesting, which affected my engagement. But it actually was a very good course.
That's good to know. So it was based on the 6th edition and Little Agile?
Sixth edition, they gave us like 4 books. They had their own study guide, 6th edition, PMBOK, Agile Practice Guide, their own version of an Agile practice, and their own version of a study guide. And I think they gave us some electronic note cards, and they had a similar LMS like yours that we had 1 year access to.
Gotcha. So the being devoid of Agile meant even if you remembered the PMBOK part, you still needed to beef up your Agile game. So let's fast forward to 2022, right? So you already had found out about your friend Phil, and then you decided we're going to come for a course. So, some people would have said, just read and study alone, why go for a course again? So what was that moment of decision about? Why did you decide that?
I took that course, which ended in December of 2020. And the idea was within 2 months, he said, because of how our brain works, get prepared to take this exam. So within 2 months, I had some family emergencies and situations that stopped me from being able to take that course in February or March as I'd actually planned last year. So once I missed that spring cutoff, I knew that mentally I kind of needed to start over because it was too much material. And again, that was a different test back then, as you know. It was mainly predictive. Agile was maybe going to be, from what we thought, was about 20 to 30% on there. And so even back then, he said PMBOK, I don't know if PMBOK, I think PMBOK 7 was getting made, but he said this test is going to change in a few months. So by the time I was looking at taking it again, I knew it changed. So I needed to start studying all over again. And then I said, okay, I'm going to look at Phil's videos. Then I'm going to self-study. But it became overwhelming because, again, listening to these lessons learned, the test kept changing. And then I had to keep changing the way I was studying. They kept adding more Agile. And my course had Agile, but not a lot. So I'm like, am I going to read that whole book? And then again, what's the split? What's the cutoff? And then it's changing again. So I said, okay, let me just table this in 2021 and try it again in the fall. Still didn't happen. So fast forward to this year. In the summertime, I had a little more time than usual. I said, I'm just going to take an immersion course because that's going to be like a refresher. And then I'm going to prepare to take the test maybe at the end of the summer. But when I took your immersion, I realized how much the test has changed and how much I did not know, believe it or not. I know you guys thought I knew a lot, but I realized what I didn't know. And I was not Agile prepared the way I have PMBOK deficits, but I had more Agile deficits. And I didn't realize that I understudied for Agile. So I said, no, I just need the full course. And that's what happened this past summer.
That's true. I remember that day you came for the immersion. Two other folks in addition to you, and you just all decided, you know what, let's just go the full mile because there's a lot more that has changed on the exam that I cannot even begin to study the stuff. So you came for the class, you were very engaged, very knowledgeable. And when the class got done, life started coming at you. All sorts of crazy stuff started happening, and you were not able to take the exam as quickly. So how were you studying and how did you stay afloat? How did you prevent yourself from going under? Because a lot of folks, they never come back. They never come back from that. Oh, life came at me. It's like grabs them, and we never hear of them taking the PMP for some people for years.
Yes.
I had a student for 3 years. He never ended up taking the exam. One guy out of Canada, but then he decided, oh, I'm really going to try everything I can to take it, and he did. But how did you stay in there? Because there were times we also didn't see you in the daily scrum. Like, I hope Cynthia hasn't been taken to the I wish I'd taken PMP immediately after. So tell us the story.
So on the days where I wasn't there, I said, okay, I have At the time frames when things were going on, I didn't have the exact time to devote attention to either the Scrum or to your class or to studying with a group. But I said, okay, even if it's, and I have bad hours, even if I started at 10 or 11 tonight, if I can, so look at Immersion book for this amount of time, do 4 questions from Immersion, watch a video based on what I'm weak in, not just start watching everything is too much, watch what I know I need help in, and then electronically look at the back part of Agile, which is what my original class did not focus on too much. There's some more specific detailed Agile parts. So I had a self-study method basically. And if I was too tired to read, I would just start watching your videos, because for some reason, listening to you go through them, it stays in my brain. Just the verbal of it, it just stays. And I know for a lot of people, your podcast are what they do. But for me, the visual of you talking, you showing a screen, me connecting that image with the concept, and then it permeates through. And then the next day at work, just flipping through. I never opened my PMBOK again. After that first class, I actually never opened it again. I'm just going to be honest. Yeah, Chandra, it is true. And then Agile, I kept meaning to open it, but what I found myself doing was just looking at the glossary and then Googling terms I wasn't familiar with and getting all this information from Google based on the Agile term. So I found a method of self-study, but when I was too exhausted to study, I would literally just watch your videos. So a lot of time when you didn't see me, I might have been even doing what I was, sometimes I had deadlines at work. That was part of the reason y'all didn't see me, because I had an audit. A lot of the reason you guys didn't see me, I had a really big audit coming up where I was doing 90% of the work. So while I was doing my audit work, I would have you on video in the background while I'm doing that work for as long as I'm working. So if I'm working 6 hours on my stuff at work, I have your videos on 6 hours. You often have like a main line of these streams where the videos just go one after the other continuously. That's what I would do. You have a lo-fi video, you have a rap video, just have them going on. And sometimes they repeat, which was perfect. So I'll probably be working 8 hours, but it's repeated and stayed in my head. So a lot of your videos are what I used. And then what I'm telling them is that Immersion book really is enough. I meant to do more than Immersion, but I would end up going back to it. And then what I tried to do was to go over the process tables so that didn't fall out of my head. That's what happened to me last time. When I took that old course, a lot of that knowledge fell out. Obviously, we can't retain it some people do retain it forever, but I had to keep putting it back in. So I had a self-study method that kept changing. And on weekends, your videos all weekend, no matter what I'm doing, laundry, on the phone, work, a lot of my work stretched into the weekends, continuously have you in the background all day long.
Wow, that is really helpful lessons learned, because I know people are struggling with it. And my mantra has always been no more Jerry, no more Judge Judy, no more Oprah. Sorry. No more Seinfeld. It's your friend Phil from here on out. And you really took it and you implemented it, and look at it. You're a PMP guru today. I'm really excited that you did that. Now, I know you were very cognizant of the PMBOK 6th edition. So I guess you were not spending inordinate amounts of time trying to go over the 49 processes again. So what was more of your time spent on? Did you spend more time on Agile? Was it spent more on what? What would the breakdown be?
Yes, because I kept hearing people say how much this test had tilted toward Agile, which made me happy actually. So it's funny, I didn't realize I was stronger in PMBOK than Agile, and that's something that I also recommend people analyze for themselves. Your brain is going to favor one more than the other. So it's good to identify which one you're a little bit stronger in. So I was actually weaker in Agile, which was shocking. So what I said was do Immersion and try and get focused in Agile. and do Agile-based quizzes, Agile hybridized tests, which again, everyone who's listening, do Agile hybrid tests only. Don't do any older tests where it's this much predictive, this much Agile. Do hybrid, hybrid, hybrid. This test is pure hybrid. There was no predictive only section on my test. It was either going to be hybrid or Agile.
That's crazy. So for
Yes.
the hybrid kind of stuff, they mix a question that's predictive, and then they put a dose of Agile options, and you got to choose the one that's best fits, or vice versa, an Agile question with predictive options, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And what else? Describe like just the nature of how things were without necessarily giving any examples, but just give what you experienced in terms of just descriptions of buckets.
I have to credit your Agile hybrid exams. Structure very similar. Some of the questions are actually exact. There's 2 or 3 questions that are exact. So everything is you are a project manager. It starts off like that. And then it'll say there's an element that of this job that you're entering or that you're asked to perform that adheres to a predictive mindset, but they're now incorporating Agile. There's a lot of tests, or they're new to Agile. They're now going to incorporate Agile. What should they focus on? How should you help integrate this? What would you recommend they do? How are you going to support your team? And so the first questions just jump you right into that hybrid mindset. You're an Agile manager. You're trying to show your team the usefulness of Agile. How are you going to move them into this new way of working? And then the questions ask it, and the questions are not always obviously something you would eliminate. You have to understand Agile mindset. But what makes it tricky is that you're not a Scrum Master. You're not a Scrum Master. So you, in your brain, you have to say, since this is predictive, if something is identifying you as a project manager doing a predictive-based action, eliminate it. Your action should be Agile-based, even though you're a project manager. But at the same time, you have to remember you're not the Scrum Master either. So that's how the questions were set up. Wow. And some of them were there's a few questions. I know you've asked people, how did this test start? That first section, some of those questions were so technical, I didn't understand the question.
Wow.
And again, watching your lessons learned, you have to train yourself to keep moving through those, because the more understandable questions come later on, and you don't want to spend your time trying to understand the question. You literally, that 1 minute 15 is real. And for the first time in my life, I stayed exactly on point with my question timing. And all that is doing your questions over and over and over and over. Even if the score of your test was not where I wanted it to be, which it never was, the idea is, how much time am I spending, and am I able to get to the answer I feel comfortable with? So initially, the first questions I saw mimicked what you had on your LMS, so I felt okay, but it slowly started going into language I didn't even understand. Wow. And had it not been for your guidance through these lessons learned, I would have thought, I don't know enough to take this test. Wow. Which I never thought. I've actually never had that feeling on a certification test before, where I thought I didn't know enough. But I remembered, okay, there's a certain amount of tests that they're testing and that they're going to throw out. This may very well be one of them. And that's something I think I heard April say. You can miss X amount because, you know, it might be thrown out anyway. Just get to what you feel most comfortable with as an answer. And what I did was, don't go back to the question, you know, you don't understand it. See the choices that should not be the right answer. Escalate this to blah, 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 blah. Wait and see someone else. Assign this to someone else. Go ask someone what their opinion is. Cross, cross, cross. You know, it's the one where you're making the decision. You're supporting the team. You're not delegating or telling them what to do, but you're also handling it, and you're solving. If there's a problem, you're solving it once and for all. And yeah, there's a pattern to these questions. And some of them use the exact same terminology. And again, if you understand Agile mindset, cross out, okay, that's deferring this to someone else. We don't do that. We solve it ourselves. Cross. And what I would recommend, because there's a lot of tools on this test that people are going to want to use, like the scratch out, there's a highlight function. My advice to you guys is don't use those things. It takes a while before they work and you lose seconds doing it. Try to eliminate those questions to the best of your ability in your head, because the time you're losing trying to scratch things out is really invaluable. And the other advice I want to give before I forget, the person before me made their font really big. I guess they had challenges with their eyesight. Because it was so big, I was able to read my question fast. So even for those of you like me that don't even wear glasses, if your font is big, it helps you to read things really quickly. It helps you to see that whole, I did take speed reading when I was in college, but it helps you to see the sentence faster. So my advice is don't watch the size of your font. If you need a proctor to help you do that, try to make it big so that in one glance, you can get a good picture of that whole question. And that's what helped me stay on time.
That's powerful.
And when you try also, there's a section that says mark the ones you want to go back to. Try to ignore that thing. Try to be, I understand now what Phil means by confident. Try to say, I'm going to choose this answer and I'm going to try my best not to go back. Now, some of them, there's always going to be a few where you want to check it again later. Try to make that as low a number as possible. I'm going to choose D. I like D. I'm not going to go back to it. I'm going to move on. Because when you start doing that, you're losing. What happened is I finished the first part with a lot of time left. So I used that time to check back answers I did before. And most of those I didn't even change again. So you're losing that chunk of time for the next section. It's not worth it. Choose it, be confident, move on. That's my other advice.
I like this quote. A very wise person once said, and she said, don't go back to the question. you don't understand it. Wow, that is profound. That is mind-blowing, because you know what a lot of people are going to do? They're going to spend 5 minutes reading that ridiculous red herring. You don't understand it. So why not just focus on the answers and look for the answers that go in line with the agile mindset or the servant leader mindset? Wow, that is I can't tell you how this makes my day, because I know this is what eats into people's time on the exam. It's that same second guessing. I'm sure I know this. Let me read it 2 more times. No, it's not gonna, it's gonna make it even worse. So that is a very, very profound statement. I like what you said about being confident and staying on track and just going, because doing that is just going to help save you time at the end. And you could be a fast reader, right? So how many hours did you spend overall? Did you max out the 230, or how did it pan out at the end of the exam?
I did max it out. I'm kind of frustrated. I'm one of those people that actually would have finished maybe, if I had not gone back to so many answers, I probably would have finished with maybe at least 20 minutes left. But because I kept using extra time, and this will make sense as you guys take the test, there's time that I thought was extra, but that was actually time I could have allocated toward another section. I would use it toward back checking. So I am a fast reader. I have my own way of reading these questions, which I have to be careful to recommend to other people. I have a strategy where I look at it in a chunk, try to identify what I think is the problem, and then I go back and look at the last 2 sentences, which is where the meat of that question usually is. And sometimes those last 2 sentences are the only things that are relevant sometimes. But yes, I am a fast reader. That can work against you, because you need to make sure, and I think I heard Carice say this, you need to make sure, it is Dixiv. This test is all Dixiv. Is there actually a problem? And you need to be able to do this, hopefully before you look. Sometimes if you understand the question, you can do this before you look at the answers. If you don't understand the question, I recommend you just go straight to the answers, see what you can eliminate. But what is going on here? Is there an actual problem? If there is, where did the problem can I determine where it originated from? If I can't, do I see root cause in one of the question options? If there's not an actual problem, let me look at the choices and see if that is an option, like do nothing, leave it alone, because that kind of gives you a little more confidence that you're understanding that there is no problem. If there is a problem, like I said, where does the problem originate from? Because they're going to give you a solution to a section where the problem does not lie. They're going to suggest, okay, you can resolve this way. You can change your team member and something like that. But the issue is not with your team member. The issue is there's a defect. And so adjusting resolving conflict on your team, adjusting the members, that's not where the issue is. Make sure you, like you said, root cause in there. Do we know what the actual issue is? And if we don't, is there a question option that says search for root cause? That's how you know you're on the right track. So don't ever just start answering a question. Make sure you understand what the problem actually is asking. I can't say this enough. That's why a lot of us miss questions, because we didn't really look to see what it's asking you. Yes. Sorry, I have some background noise.
That's cool. That's great. And thanks for bringing that up. I like the whole idea about chunking and seeing the whole picture. And this is, what a lot of the great speed reading coaches will tell you. You see the whole thing as a picture, not trying to read through no, you just see everything, and you've trained yourself enough to do it. And that's why I recommend to people, try and take a speed reading course and try and develop your own unique way. Like you described, the chunking, then identifying the gold in there of the question, and then the last two lines. That is really helpful. So Cynthia, walk us through the timeline before we get lost in this Dixiv, because I could go off on a rabbit trail regarding Dixiv. For those who don't know what it is, I would say go watch the videos on the channel to understand, define the problem, identify the root cause, generate alternatives, choose the best alternative, implement the alternative, and verify the solution effectiveness. But let's talk about the timing. So did you start off with this 2:30, 1:55? Is it 1:55? Did you do that, or what were your milestones for the timing at the end of each section?
So I did a very rough calculation, which I hope helps people. I know it's 60, 60, 60. That's how this thing is divided. So I gave myself less time. I think the true division mark is 1 minute 12 to 1:15 average per question. But I took away those extra seconds. I said 60 questions, do it in 60 minutes. That's
what our friend Frank did. So the first 60 started at, then it was 170, huh? Like that for the next 60, the beginning of the next 60. And then for the last one, 110. That's a lot. So how did that work out?
For the first time in my life, it's because I did the test so many times. I was completely on target with my timing. So what I said is, and you feel it. You feel when you've gone beyond a minute. Look at this question. If it's taking you too long to think, put something down and move on. So the point is, do this question within 60 seconds. And what that allows you to do is, if a question is low-hanging fruit that you know the answer to, you're probably going to do it in 30 seconds because the answer jumps out at you. And because you did that first question in 30 seconds, the second question, which takes a little more time to digest, you might actually go more than a minute with it, but you know that because you're training yourself to do the ones that you're confident with 60 seconds or less, you have more pooled time for the longer questions to sort of decipher them. So by giving yourself a short amount of time, it actually allows you, ironically, more time for the harder questions. Because in your head, you're like, oh, I know that this has to be B. You hit B and move on. That's what you have to train yourself to do. Don't go back. Okay, was I right? Was it really B? No, if it looks like B, feels like it, put it down, move on. And that way you have a little more time to read what's going on in the next question. So 60 is what I put in my brain. In reality, what's happening is questions that were straightforward, I was probably spending 30 to 45 seconds on because I did that. Questions that were not straightforward, I was probably spending 1 minute to 120, but if you divide it out, it worked out perfectly to divide into 60 questions, 60 seconds a question, if that makes sense. Because easier questions are taking you half as long because your mind is saying, I'm not going to go beyond 60. The harder to understand questions are taking you the true 115 to 120. And when you add it all up, it still ends up to 60 seconds a question, which gives you extra time at the end.
Gotcha. So if we follow that plan, we're going to have about 50 minutes remaining at the end if we follow that plan. But like you said, the reality of it is that could work for some questions, but there's some you might spend a little bit more. And at the end of the day, it might all balance out to give you just so you had enough time though to go through all 180. You weren't finding yourself in, oh my gosh, I got like 10 minutes and I got all this huge, like one of our students had 10 minutes and 40 questions. And she was just saying, okay, I'm just not even going to read the question. I'm just going to read the answers. You didn't find yourself needing to do that using this method, did you?
I did at the end because, again, not understanding how this test works. With all those time cushions I had, I kept reviewing what I had done before.
Oh,
and I hate to say this, but try your best not to get into the practice of reviewing everything. Tell yourself, I'm only going to mark the question. I would never, if I were you guys, I would not mark a question I don't understand for what Phil just said in that quote. It's okay that you don't know every question. You can still score I'm telling you, you can still score very high without understanding every question. Accept that you don't know it. Put an answer, don't go back and check it. Check the ones where you feel like you just need a little more time to think, which are very few questions. Maybe 1 to 3 questions are going to be like that, no more than 5. If you find yourself checking more than 5 questions, you need to stop. It's going to backfire on you because you're going to probably finish with extra time left and go through it, because there's a thing that lets you go through every single question from that section. Don't do that. Be very confident in what you think you know. I'm not saying race, but before you leave that question, tell yourself, I don't want to go back to this question. I want to just answer this, even if you have to do a slight peek to make sure, okay, from what's in this paragraph, this is what I think the answer is. I'd rather you waste 10 seconds doing that than going all the way back and rereading that question to probably not even changing it. You're probably going to leave that answer as it is anyway, and you've lost extra time that you can devote towards another section. And you really need to be cognizant of time. Every time you finish a section, look at how much time you have left. And that way you won't be at that position at the end of having fewer time than questions. But if it happens, do exactly what that other person said, because I also did that. Just look at your question options. There is a pattern to the questions for a lot of them where you can say escalate, no, defer, no, wait, no, and just circle something, move on. Don't reread that question, as tempting as it is, move on, because you don't have time.
Gotcha.
So the time is the biggest barrier for this test, is not even knowledge. Yeah.
I've heard that from so many sources. Now, this last few slides, Cynthia, they're about the proverbial ITTOs, inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Some people, they feel they need to cram them. What do you have to say about that?
This is going to be very specific to this exam. There are some exams where ITTOs were a big deal. This exam has very few ITTO based questions, but it did have a few specific questions about it. And what I have to say is, again, when you're studying, understand how things relate. If you're starting a new project, in your head say, what do I need to do in order to start that project? I'm going to speak to people who have done that before, which is eliciting their expert judgment. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to have a meeting with them. So that way, I'm not sitting and memorizing meetings, workshop. I'm saying, okay, I'm new at this. I need to sit and talk to people. I do that through using a meeting. If you connect ideas that way, as opposed to memorizing, that's what you need to do. This is no longer a memorization-based test. I mean, it could change in the future. In past tests, there was a lot of rote memorization, process to process. If I'm doing this, what do I need to do? What kind of a diagram do I need? You don't have those kind of questions here about what diagrams are best. And is this maybe one or two, but it's kind of straightforward.
It's changed a whole lot. You're right.
It's a lot. And even since 2020, it's a much different test from when I started this journey, which is why I retook the class, because that focus was different. That was a mainly maybe 60%, maybe 70% predictive test, 30% agile, no hybrid. Now this test is hybrid. So if you don't understand the mindset, you're not going to get the question right, which I was very concerned for people. I'm saying a lot of people are going to understand concepts and not know how to merge it the way these questions are formed. So as far as ITTOs, don't memorize. Anybody will tell you don't memorize them, but understand what you need to accomplish in that process and what kinds of things would help you accomplish it. Okay, we need to analyze risk. What kinds of things will help me analyze risk? As you're studying, do this so that when you see them on the test, oh, this kind of diagram, oh yeah, that would help me. And they're going to have options that are obviously that don't make sense. And that helps you to eliminate them. So don't understand how the techniques could lend you to the output, lead you to the output. That's what I would do as I'm studying. Don't memorize ITTOs. And again, very few ITTO based questions on this test.
That is helpful, Cynthia. Let's talk about the knowledge areas. Any advice about knowledge areas? How would you tackle that now that you've got this experience on the test? If you're going to study knowledge areas again, how would you do it?
It's tricky for this specific test. Unlike other tests, they don't ask you process specific questions about this knowledge area leading to this. You have to know they're gonna give you a scenario where there's a problem based in a knowledge or process area. And you're going to have to understand that, okay, the issue is the schedule, because you're going to have to decipher, is the issue with the budget? Is the issue with the schedule? Is the issue with the scope not being understood? So that's where your challenge is. So overall knowledge of what scope is doing for a project, what schedule is doing, what budget is doing. Because a lot of these questions, because people are so money obsessed, it'll say you can save money this way, you can save money that way, you can say, and the issue was money, the budget wasn't a problem. And if you know how to interpret SPI and CPI, you can see, no, they were on budget. It's the schedule that was the issue. And if the schedule was the issue, what types of things help us to stay on schedule? Or what kinds of things am I going to recommend them do in the future to tighten up the schedule? So it's the overall understanding of how does schedule support a project? How does scope support it? When is quality an issue? If quality is an issue, is it a quality assurance? And this was actually on my test yesterday. Is it a quality assurance issue or is it a quality control issue? That's how you need to be thinking, which is actually a little bit easier than memorizing each step. But there is such a thing as what comes next. You understand schedule is the issue, but which part of schedule should you tackle? You understand that scope is an issue, but where should you intervene? And that's where understanding the flow helps, where activity is not well defined, and that's why they didn't understand what to do next. So you do have to understand it to that level. if that helps.
It absolutely does. Thank you for shedding light on that. The last few questions that we have, things you might have answered. So we have a question here, which is a customary. Did you read the PMBOK guide? How many hours did you study daily? How many additional books do I need? So let me beam those questions up and you can just answer whichever ones you feel are worth answering. So I think you've already implicitly answered most of them. So
Okay,
you
so
read the PMBOK, you read the PMBOK guide before.
yeah.
You studied all around the clock, because a lot of people, getting hung up on, oh, it has to be 2 hours or 3 hours. No, you are just playing a lot of my stuff in the background, and you went, a lot of hours without even having to micro count each hour. People ask, how many additional books do I need? You've already talked about the Immersion, and you talked about the LMS. The Agile Practice Guide, did you read that one?
I read it when I initially took this, when I initially took the university course. I didn't read it. I'm just now realizing I didn't read it. What I ended up doing was starting with Immersion and going to Agile-based websites, which is what another person recommended. And I'm sorry, I'm going to mess these up. One is scrum.org. A lot of these Agile-based sites, are going to, again, I'm talking test specific. The test might change, but for this test, it leads you to the mindset.
The mindset,
It's not going to ask you a whole lot of, scrum of scrums, how many people are in each meeting. This test doesn't go into that type of detail, but it wants you to know what is valued in an Agile project. How are you structuring your team? How are you allowing them to function? Do a lot of questions for Agile. Do you know when to jump in? And I think this is kind of tricky. For Agile, it's not like predictive where we feel like we have to solve everything. Sometimes for Agile, you have to be hands off. We consider it laissez-faire, but it's actually not. You can impede the team by jumping in an Agile. So you have to know when you're jumping in and when you don't. And there's specific questions that say, should you do something? So what Phil has at the end of Immersion about Agile mindset, I can't tell y'all how important that is. If you guys don't master that, you might have issues with this test, because it's pure understanding mindset. When do you intervene in Agile? When do you leave it alone? When do you coach someone? When do you not? When do you have a teammate coach them? When does someone need formal training versus when do you pair them with an experienced teammate? And that's the level you have to understand. How is it best to coach the person? So coaching them can apply to either predictive or Agile, but in the spirit of Agile, how am I pairing a more senior member with this less experienced teammate and understanding where I step out and let that person be more of a coach, or when I step in and arrange a training? That is the challenge. And the only way to understand that is to get the mindset down and then to go back to that delegation and coaching section. So it's not going to, there is a question about do you direct or coach this person, but it's more like, what is the best way for you to handle someone who's having a challenge as a project manager with an Agile project? That's what makes it tricky.
That is so helpful.
So I did not read Agile, to answer your question. I did not reread it for this test. I don't think someone has to completely reread Agile. I think Immersion is enough.
Gotcha. And you were actually in the full-blown project management masterclass. We actually did talk about that. So what was your experience like on a masterclass? Was it what you expected? Was it more?
It was perfect, because what you're doing in each class, and I can't emphasize this enough about looking at a question and just trying to, get to an answer, accurate answer as fast as possible. Those quizzes you give where you go 3, 2, 1. I can't tell you enough how that not only does that keep you engaged, but it trains you on how to take this test. I'm looking at this. Do I know what it's asking me? From what it's asking me, can I immediately get to the answer? That is why I was able to finish my questions, training myself like this. Okay, now I know what it's asking. Let me get to the answers. And then, okay, now I have an answer. So that first part is what I loved about your class. The second part is your explanations. And you know how to get past the extraneous detail, because this is not, it's not like CAPM, where this is starting here, then next go here. This is conceptual, analytical, problem-based, scenario-based. So it's understanding a concept instead of memorizing step 1, 2, and 3. So your course trains someone on how to see where's the problem, what's important, how do I tackle it, what kinds of people do I need to tackle it. You don't just assign things to anyone. Sometimes you need the technical people. Sometimes you need broad-based people. Sometimes it needs to be you. And so yours helps to cut through what's important. And so that's what the class allowed me to do. And the extra parts, your masterclass helped me to identify where I was weak and what parts I needed to study. And it usually meant going back to Immersion, because Immersion is a hybridized book. I can't say the word hybrid enough. And I don't think they're going to change that aspect of this test, because they know in the real world it's a merge. You may stay with a project manager title, but you're going to use more of an agile mindset. And in some parts of your project might have to stay predictive because of your need to stay on budget. You might not have a flexible budget in your project. So Immersion, hybridized, Masterclass helps you to focus on hybrid mindset.
That is great feedback. Thank you so much. At this point, we got some friends on the call, and I want to ask our friends if they've got any questions for you. Any questions for our PMP guru today? Any concerns? You can always chat them in, or you can unmute and ask them if you got any. I'm carting away a lot of inspiration to go write more questions based on what you just said.
Please do. Yeah.
Please do that, like within 24 hours, Phil.
Look at
her.
her.
The clock is ticking. So Cynthia, congratulations again.
Thank you.
I felt like you were ready from the first day that I joined the Immersion class. Well, and you've always had this cool demeanor, like no matter what's going on. So I'm not surprised that you weren't frazzled at all by the exams. I need that kind of to tap into that. My question is, you said something about to be able to distinguish between basically using a servant leadership mindset to respond to a hybridized question. So you are not thinking as a Scrum Master, but you have to apply some element of servant leadership. So like that place kind of hazy for me.
What's going to help you are the questions. It is, I understand so much why Phil does what he does now, because you have to know how to focus your brain on what's going on, and it's not about knowledge. So you have to understand what a function of a project manager is in your brain first. Second of all, you have to understand what Agile does not like. Phil says, what is not in the spirit of Agile. That is maybe 90% of this test. What is not in the spirit of Agile. If you don't know how to answer that question, you probably will not pass this test. So that's even though I'm using the word hybridized, I'm using the word project manager, not Scrum Master. If you can understand as a project manager what is not in the spirit of Agile, you're going to be okay. And the only way to do that is to look at the question, the 4 options at the bottom. They're going to give you some options that are purely predictive mindset. Eliminate those right away. They're going to give you 2 options that have Agile incorporated into it. So then which one as a project manager leads to you solving the problem, but by empowering your team to solve the problem? That's where that interface happens. Because one is going to say, okay, you go ahead and you do X, Y, Z. this is not predictive. You don't just go and take it on and fix it. You have a team that is highly skilled, and you empower them, but you have to make sure, the other tricky part, you have to make sure you're empowering them to answer the problem, because they're going to give you a thing where you're empowering them to work on a budget. The budget is not the issue. To compress schedule is not the issue. And so you have to understand what the problem is, that you need to empower the team as a servant leader, and you need to make sure the actual problem is being addressed. So you have to go through a system of questions. What is the problem? What is purely predictive that I can eliminate? I'm a project manager, but I'm also a servant leader. So anything that puts me as the hero of solving this, you want to shy away from. How can I push the team towards solving the actual problem? So there's the merger, and it makes sense if you think about it. I'm a project manager, but I'm a servant leader. So I'm not the hero, but I need to make sure my team is addressing what's actually the problem. So the questions will help you, Cindy, in determining those, because it is a very vague position to be in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is a great, you just gave me an idea for a ton of concepts based on what you just said. So I'm really grateful for that. That is something that we need to look out for, because it might sound like the right thing, but if it's just you working in a silo as the hero, you're gonna get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I got very concerned about this test. There are certain answers that are not wrong, but they're not agile mindset. Agile mindset. Get that down. Agile mindset. Don't even go through that process table and be trying to memorize anything about memorization. What is this level of Scrum? You know, you want to know the average number of people who should be in a daily stand-up and all that. You want to know the basics. But mindset, scenario, that's what's going to get you to success. Take test questions. Some of Phil's questions were replicated on this test, about 3 of them, I have to say. Those
this is
very,
great.
yeah. Your agile
Cynthia,
hybrid are good. Yeah.
I would love for you to write some questions for us. If you could just give us a handful, just 5, and I can take those 5 and I know what to do with them. Because I've been asking people who have been certified, what is your view of the world of questions? And you just gave me a brilliant idea. And I will share it with you, but not with everyone else who's preparing. Because I don't want them to know what you just dropped. You just dropped some bomb. I just got a really brilliant idea of how to write questions that will help our friends. So you've given me a format, you give me a blueprint. I'll share that with you, but not with them.
Good. Good. And speaking of questions, I know everyone you've spoken to addresses question length.
Yeah.
I want to say the average length of questions maybe is between 4 lines is the average. There are questions that are 5 to 6 lines worth.
Wow.
And there are questions that are 3. There are very few short questions. But even so, a 3-line question is probably very direct. So even though it's not just one quick sentence, the 3-line questions are usually those you can get through pretty easily. But I would say the average length is 4 to 5. But someone who does your test should be able to do that, because your questions are actually slightly long. Either they're on point or slightly longer. So I can't tell people enough to do Phil's test over and over and over and over and over and over, and see what kinds of things you're missing, because the key is speed and accuracy.
Thank you for bringing that up, Cynthia. Actually, why don't we just take a very quick look at some lengths of questions, and you can comment accordingly. So something like this, is this far out? Just looking at the volume, is this just like too long? Or
They're not a lot of these. There may be out of 180 questions or whatever it adds up to, maybe there are 4 or 5 of these.
Okay, let's take a look at something else. Yeah, like this.
There are a lot of these level.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
What about something like this? Is this normal?
A majority, a vast, at least 50% are this length.
That's good to
Maybe
know.
60.
And then what about the length of the answers? Do they spill into like 2 lines?
They're long. The length of the answers
Wow.
typically is long. You do
Wow.
have a few that are this length. A majority of them are 2 lines.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yes, and that's
Okay.
why very few like this.
Oh, very few this
Maybe
short, huh?
one. Yeah, maybe
Wow.
1 or 2.
These
1 or
guys
2.
aren't playing. They're not playing. They're not playing. Oh my
And that's
God.
why I say look at the questions too, because sometimes the questions are longer to read than actually
Mm.
understanding what the issue is in the paragraph.
Is there a lot of fluff in some of them, like red herrings, or does every word count in every question, would you say? Well, there's
It's
some you were
funny.
able to say fluff.
I saw very little fluff. What happens is the first part is so that you understand who you are and what you're working on. There's not a lot of extraneous information per se, which is unfortunate because for the longer questions, I got used to just looking at the bottom half. So you do actually have to read the questions, but the majority of what you need to know for the question is at the end. But at the top keeps saying you are a project manager. So I mean, it gets to the point where you may not need to read the top, because in a lot of older questions, you have to know if you're the Scrum Master or if you're a team member. But most of these is you are a project manager. So what you want to look at the top is the project. Are you introducing them newly into Agile, or have they been doing Agile for a while? Is there pushback on using Agile? Do you see they're not adhering well to the principles of Agile? There are very few things where it's just they're an Agile project and they've always been Agile. It's usually a project manager trying to integrate or train people how to move into Agile. And how do you do that seamlessly? So a lot of the top part you can glaze over, but I wouldn't call it fluff per se.
That's good to know. Good to know. Good balance. Let's take a look at this final question, Cynthia. What would you do differently?
Oh my goodness. And again, for anyone that watches this is test specific. Had I known that it was not the detailed questions that, the way, I'm glad Phil allowed me to kind of look through the CAPM course. The old way of training for this test, as Phil knows, was almost that CAPM mindset of memorize these 49 processes and knowledge areas, memorize the mnemonics, go through this starts first, this starts second, this starts third, which is helpful. That helps you very little for this test. And had I known that those type of details, I don't need to spend a lot of time on. Again, a lot of that stuff I already knew, so it wasn't like I was learning it from scratch, but I wouldn't focus so much on anything that requires memorization is what I'm trying to say. Those few days before where you're like, okay, I don't know this and I don't know this and I don't do that. What he said about mindset. Do I know what should be priority in a project? Do I know where the problem areas lie in this problem or concept? Do I know if there's a problem at all? Do I understand enough about Agile to understand what is expected with an Agile team, especially a new Agile team? They don't start off high functioning. So if you're seeing people struggle, unlike predictive, where someone is struggling, you have to jump in and coach and direct. You let them go through a natural process. That is what you need to understand about Agile. It's not memorizing how many people are on this team and how many scrum of scrums have to lead to this and feedback into this, how long the retrospective sessions are, and how many I can do in this time period. It's more like, do you know how we expect an Agile team to function? Do you know when they're not functioning well? Do you know how to help? The word is help a team that's not functioning well. You don't solve their problem. You don't sit and say, you do this, you help guide them to the mindset. Well, how do I do this? Okay, let me show you the manifesto. Do I understand what the manifesto says? Do I understand the 4 major principles? If you don't, get that in your head, but just know the test is not going to say, making a plan or following this. It's not going to ask it like that. It's going to see if you know that through the way the question is structured. Should they be focused on making a plan, or should they, if you see the word comprehensive documentation somewhere, that's against spirit of Agile. So that's not going to lead to the solution. That's how they're going to ask it. They're going to integrate it into the strategy. They're not going to ask you to finish the sentence of those 4 principles, but you should still read those 4 principles and know that we like working product, over documentation. You should know that, because there's going to be a point that says this didn't work. Do we send them a brochure? I think there's literally a question like that. Do we send them a brochure that's like a how-to guide? And the answer is in Agile, no. We're not going to send you more writing. And predictive, yes, we want to give you a guideline of tools and a strategy to follow. But with this, no, we're concerned with working product. So we're going to do face-to-face communication with you in order to get a working product. And it's understanding what face-to-face means. There was a question where they wanted face-to-face communication, but it was disguised as the word meeting. And I had to say, oh, using a meeting is the right way to look at this, because that is face-to-face. But it didn't use that term face-to-face. So you have to train your mind. What does Agile want? And how do I interpret it multiple ways? Yeah, so that the few days before, guys, don't be trying to memorize. If you find yourself memorizing something, you're not helping yourself. You need to understand, what does Agile value? What do I not want to do as a project manager? And one of the main things that's on here is priority. There's a list of things wrong. What do I address first from this list? All of these things need to be addressed, but what is the most important on this list that I need to address? So concept, strategy, testing speed, mindset. Don't sit and be trying to memorize anything the week before. And like Phil said, the night before, you really shouldn't be reading anything, because you need to calm down, because when you take the test, even if you don't know the answer, you need to be confident in what you're putting down, and you're going to go back and check everything and sabotage yourself. There's a lot of people who have great knowledge, but they're going to ruin themselves because they don't know time management, and they're going to put a question and doubt what they wrote and use time that should be spent for another question to go back and check it and not even finish, or have to rush and guess through answers without reading them. So in your mind, have the time in the back of your head. If you don't understand a question, put something down, keep going. If a question is hard, put something down, keep going. Don't spend time with things that are hard.
Wow. You dropped some bombs today. Knowledge bombs, idea bombs. I really hope this helps a lot of our friends who are wondering how best to navigate the exam. And thanks for really blowing that all up. And you touched on a lot of points I've been meaning to touch on in videos that I haven't gotten to in the past number of months. And one of them is the Agile studying. Don't study Agile in a way that crams, how many hours should I spend in a retrospective? How many hours should I spend? I've been meaning to say that. Thank you for giving some words to those thoughts, because people study the technicalities of the little, and that's not what they're after. It's not.
Do you know when a retrospective is needed? That's what it's really going to ask you. What is the benefit of it? And this went wrong. What could this have benefited from? Because if you understand what happens in a retrospective and you understand the high value of that, you understand that that's going to be the right answer. It's not how long is it or who's invited to it, or at which exact part, place does it happen. And the other thing I want to probably talk to you off call, Phil, is there were some elements of PMBOK 7 that were in there. And I kind of feel, yes, no Myers-Briggs, no, but, and I'm sorry to scare people, there were some unfamiliar terms from PMBOK 7. And even though I don't know what the right answers are, I think I got them right based on how the definition was written. So I'm real, because I went back to some of those terms and looked, and I think I got them right, and I'm really proud. So there's a drag and drop that's based on some terms from PMBOK 7, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to go over them.
We'll keep them
Yeah, but I'll
anonymous.
talk to Phil about some stuff.
But
So
the saving grace is I do mention going through my 1 hour, it's only a 1.5 hour video on YouTube. I tell people go through it. And I do mention that. And if you look for the PMBOK Guide 7 video, because I've covered every single terminology, methods, models, and artifacts, I've covered about 200 terminologies in the PMBOK 7. I've covered them all, and it's up there for free on YouTube for anyone who cares to listen to what Phil is always saying, like a barking dog. He talks too much. I'm not going to do that. Well, you hear what Cynthia said. It's on the test. Some of it is on the test.
Look through the terminology, but it's literally 1 or 2 questions. So don't waste your time trying. What Phil says is true, even if you never open that book. To be honest, if you use common sense, you can get to the answers for those few sections. It's not like Myers-Briggs where you kind of have to know it. You can fudge your way to the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So for our friends on the call, I don't know if you've done this, but it's all methods, models, and artifacts. And I spent months putting that stuff together. If you're smart, you'll do what she's telling you. I'm going to put that in the chat right here. And I'm going to ask you to go just watch the video, because I cover all the terminologies, all methods, all models, all artifacts. And every point counts, Cynthia, because you could have someone who's just hanging in the balance and needs one more point.
Yes.
PMI isn't going to say, oh, well, we'll round that up to the next dollar. No, you're going to go away without what you need to succeed. So every point counts. And I would highly recommend doing what Cynthia said, listening daily. There is so much content on that YouTube alone that if you're patient and you can curate it for yourself from the Praizion channel, you're going away with a treasure trove of stuff. Like a 40-day course is ridiculous. It's like 77 videos. Over 1 day and 9 hours. If you were going to sit down and watch every video, it will take you 1 day and 9 hours nonstop. That's a PMP course, and that's information that can help you on the exam. So the 40 days to PMP success, the models, methods, and artifacts videos, do everything, you know. Good deal. Anything else, Cynthia, that you'd like to drop?
Don't, I know everyone feels like diversifying the way they study is the best. This is one of those tests that kind of breaks all the old rules. Don't be careful trying to go to other test banks, because even if they're well written, they're based on older versions of this test, and you're mastering things that are not going to be asked. So yes, if you stick to Phil, it is enough. I just want to reassure people. I understand how they're thinking. There's several different options for looking at tests. And what you need is someone who's keeping his hand on the forefront of the changes, which is why, again, I retook this course, because the course from 2020, the course from 2021, those are different tests. You have to be test specific. So Phil is keeping, I can say this now, Phil is keeping up with the way the test questions are phrased. It is a hybrid test. It is not, it's asking predictive questions, and there is a what comes next, but it's not in the traditional way that predictive questions have been asked. So stick with his LMS, get your speed and accuracy up to where you're getting at least an 80 something on his test, and you're getting through 60 questions within an hour to an hour, 30 minutes. And again, I don't recommend just doing straight 180. That's not helping you. Break it up into 60s, because that is how your breaks will go. Take your breaks or you will be sorry. Just because you don't have to use the restroom, just because you don't feel tired or hungry, and you're just going to push through, you're going to mess up by the end of that test and crash. I don't care if you have to use the restroom, if you need water, stop for your two 10-minute breaks that come after the first 60 questions. Regroup and breathe, because your brain has to reset. It's a psychological thing. Your brain needs to reset. So, and when you're taking your test and practicing them, again, the key is not, okay, I have 3 hours, let me see if I can finish this in 2 hours. No. How fast can I finish 60 questions, which is a very reasonable goal. Let me look at the clock right now. It's 10:30. Let me do these 60 questions. What time is it at the end of those 60 questions? Do that 3 times till you finish Phil's test, and then look at your score. And then look at the score based on how much time it took you. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. And what you're training yourself is how to read through those long questions. Now that you actually know what the answer is, how to read through those questions and say, oh, the answer was embedded in here, or what I wasn't supposed to do is in here, or this said not, or this said doesn't, or this says you don't need to. And then sometimes, you know, in this test, they actually gave a few hints within the question. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It was saying that it gave a suggestion in there that these two people are speaking and that conflict is not the issue. It gave a little hint in there. How should you approach it? And then it has conflict resolution strategies. And then it said some collaboration strategies. And the key was these people are a new group. They're just talking through things. You need to be able to identify when someone is actually having a true conflict. And when someone is in the early stages of, you know, forming, norming, storming, when they're just in that stage, but it's not actually a conflict. There's a difference. Everyone goes through that initial stage. And this is what you need to focus on. It's not memorizing what comes next. Is do you understand when there's a problem and when there isn't, and how you address that problem? Conceptual based test, applied knowledge based test, scenario based test. And if you look at Phil's question, it's scenarios. This test is 100% scenarios. You are in this situation, you are doing this. What should you focus on? How are you going to help your team? Do you need to do anything at all? That is what you need to do. And the only way to do that is by looking at questions over and over, not by reading and trying to memorize everything, which is why a lot of people don't do well on this test. And you have to be mindful of the time, because to give yourself a chance to pass, you need to finish the test. Even if you don't, again, and you're gonna, I can't say this enough, you're gonna have questions that you do not understand. And I think some of those are done on purpose that way. This is a very psychological test. And I see now how Phil felt when he took this test. It's a beast, and that is not even about how much you know, it's about the psychology of this test. And that's why a lot of us need training. It's not just, okay, I did PMBOK, I did Agile, I did all my questions, I scored a 90 on my test. It's like, no, do you know how to get through each question accurately and in a way that allows you to finish and in a way that you feel confident? If you can't do that, it doesn't matter how much you know. Wow. So I can see what led Phil down this path now.
Yeah, I was just smiling because I'm like, my goodness, I should just get Cynthia to help me say everything I need to say, because she sounded so much like Phil. Phil doesn't need to say anything anymore. And with that, I'm probably going to be pinging you to come speak to our students who are starting off the journey, because you're hitting every nail on the head. And I really hope you don't forget this great stuff you're sharing, and maybe find someone to mentor, you know. Okay. Someone along the way to help.
Me out.
I'm happy, Cindy. I get it now, Phil. I get it. I get when you're saying, can you help one person? You need to help people with this. And the only reason I did was because I watched these lessons learned. And I would say to anyone that hasn't taken this test, watch all the lessons learned, maybe from spring till now. Don't go beyond March of this year, because it's going to be a different test.
You're
Just
right.
go
They're crazy.
through all of them. That's what you should do before the test, Cindy and Corbin. Not just, okay, in the book, page 32. Watch lessons learned.
Absolutely.
No, I'm happy to work with you, Phil. I get it now.
Thank you. CD wants help from CD. It's funny, your names are both Cynthia and have the letter D at the end. So help CD. CD help CD.
I'm happy to. Is your test soon, Cindy?
Yes.
Okay.
in about small days, less than a week.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Well, you already know enough content to pass. The key is now speed, accuracy, and conceptual knowledge.
Absolutely. You should train this stuff, Cynthia.
You
Seriously.
know, I get it, Phil. I get why you do this. I'm thinking about, because there's so many intelligent people who are not going to do well. That's what made me
You hit the
sad.
nail on the head. It's not about the
Yes.
intelligence. Exactly. Intelligence helps in many ways. Like, you're super smart. It helps. But then you got to build on that with an understanding of the situation at hand, which is, it's not memorization. A lot of people miss that. So thanks for pointing that out and sharing all the great things you have. And yeah, I'll definitely be pinging you to help me just say everything, because like you say it so well, and you're really a product of the process. I was saying, let me open up the learning system to see how many times Cindy has taken these quiz, because you beat those questions up over and over. And I'm like, there's even no point, because I lost count after a while.
Oh,
I'm like,
really?
she's on it.
I should
I'm
have
like,
done
she's
it
on
more. And I'm saying this to you, Cindy and Corvin. I should have done it more, taking these tests. I'm telling y'all that have a week out, don't be reading. Start taking the test over and over and over and over and over and over. That's my recommendation to anybody who's less than 2 weeks toward the test. And watch Phil's videos. He has excellent videos about, you have two days before the test, 1 day before the test, 1 week before the test. Watch it. It is mindset. Mindset. Understand the manifesto, the 4 principles. Leave PMBOK alone. Don't worry about PMBOK at this point. Mindset. Do I understand what is Agile? What isn't? 2/3 of those questions about what is the spirit of Agile. Even though you're a project manager, even though you have predictive components of your project also in there, do you know mindset?
Wow. Thank
Oh,
you. I feel
another
like
thing, guys, another thing that
to
Phil
PMP.
has also, sorry, Phil.
Go for it.
Knowing the benefit of iterative versus incremental for certain tasks. You're going to have a few of those. So knowing the 4 types, predictive, agile, iterative, incremental, what is the best fit for your project based on what is described? I just wanted to throw that in there, Phil.
This is lovely. Thank you. I was saying, I feel like someone who went to PMBOK or PMP church. I heard a sermon and then some.
Oh my gosh. I just want to help people. I get it now.
Oh yeah.
If you don't help people, they may not do well, and it's not even their fault.
I'm telling you, I gained so much. I'm inspired to go write more questions. And when it's just you and I on the call, Cynthia, I'll show you what some of your ideas have prompted, because I think I've got a great question writing system right now as a result of what you shared today. But more on that later.
And his questions are good. Yeah, his questions are good, guys. Some of them are actually almost replicated. I'm going to be honest. So he's doing a good job with question writing. Thank
you, Cynthia. And you will write some for us as well, please. All right.
Okay.
So if you can write a handful,
yes.
We've had some of our friends come through and do the same, and it just helps.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the questions you encounter on the LMS were actually written by 8 different question writers, and we just like adding more and more ideas to the mix. Hi, Corvin, I see you. You're in the classroom. There's a whiteboard behind you. Kind of. Yeah, Corvin, any questions for Cynthia, or we pretty good to go?
Yes, I'm good. This
Awesome.
was a really nice session. Answered a lot of questions. You hit a lot of things straight on and explain things well. So
she does. She's
well done.
So well. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate you, and you'll be hearing more from us.
Cynthia.
Oh, I hope it's helpful, and congratulations, Chandra. Thank you for sitting in on this. I admire you a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thanks for stopping by, Chandra.
Also, Cynthia. Yeah, we started together right in the beginning.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
All right, I'm gonna hop off. Got work to do.
Okay. Thanks,
thank
folks.
you, Cindy.
Bye.
We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Yeah.